that something happened a long time ago that forced the ancient Egyptians and many other people to live underground and live in mountains and caves for, who knows how long, hundreds, thousands of years. So what you have to understand is that, the people who we talk about today as far as ancient Kemet, when we talk about Hatshepsut and we talk about the pharaohs, we talk about Akhenaten and King Tut and, all of the pharaohs or the Nisut that we talk about in ancient Kemet that we know about, the bodies we have today. What you have to understand is none of these pharaohs, none of these people were there. None of them was around when the Sphinx or Haru M. Akhet, as it's known as, none of these people were around when the Sphinx was built. So when we start looking at ancient Egyptian history, we look at the dynasties, we look at the Nisut or the pharaohs, and we think, many people think that everything that is Kemet is attributed to these people. But you have to realize that the Sphinx or Haru Amakhet, we're going to call it Sphinx for short because that's what everybody know it as, is dated about, over 34,000 years old. It's dated to. It's many people who look to the water erosion that's on the Sphinx and say, well, wait a minute, we know this happened, over 6,000 years ago, the flood. There's no way the Sphinx was built after that time. It wouldn't have that kind of water erosion in the desert. So then we still look at the accounts of it and we can date it back further than that. So they don't really have a date for the Sphinx. They just know it's over 34,000 years old. And when you look at the Great Pyramid itself as well, it is also older than what they tell us. It is much older and predates these dynasties, meaning, again, none of these pharaohs who we're talking about, none of these Nisut, none of these people, Akhenaten, none of them was around when the Great Pyramid was built. And this is going to make a lot of sense as we go along. And you have to understand that because a lot of people are getting confused. And there are little things that if you don't get, it's going to just throw you completely off in your research. So you need to understand. So again, as I talked about before in the Saturn Satan series about the pyramids, there are pyramids all over the world. Pyramids found everywhere. Not to mention the fact that they can't date some of these pyramids. Some of them they don't even talk about. They don't really want to put a date on them. The ones that they do, goes back to before these Egyptian pharaohs or Nisut that we know about, that we talk about. Not to mention the fact that there are pyramids that we can't get to and some that we can't even really examine. We have ones in China that the Chinese won't let too many people even in there. Then you have that huge pyramid-shaped mountain in Tibet that's supposed to be like the biggest pyramid in the world. It's huge. They won't let anybody in there. It's illegal for you to even climb that mountain. And the people who have tried to climb it reported that they were feeling sick or dizzy. Some people recorded time lapses where they lost time. Some people reported rapid aging. So they don't even go to that mountain and touch it. We don't even know what's there or what that is really about because anybody who tried to document it was either arrested or couldn't make the trip because they were sick or something happened to them. So we have accounts all over the world of pyramids everywhere. Pyramids in the Grand Canyon, as I'm going to show you in the Saturn Satan series. The artifacts they found there. There are pyramids all over, America. We know about the ones down in Mexico. And everywhere you look, when you start to look at the Becker-Hagen's grid, and you look at the intersecting points on that grid, we know that the map is scrap that we have today that we look at for us, the Earth. For you flat earthers, we know that map is not completely accurate, but a lot of people do go by the Becker-Hagen's grid because you can actually detect the energy coming from those intersecting points. And we know at almost every single one of those intersecting points that we have been able to explore, you'll either find ancient ruins, you'll find pyramids, like the Great Pyramids in Giza, which is under one of those intersecting points, or you'll find monuments at each one. Just about every single one of these intersecting points, of energy. So again, when you go back and you start looking at all this and putting everything together, we can see at some point, as I said, the world, everyone was obviously living in the ancient Egyptian culture, whatever it was before the dynasties. I'm talking about pre-dynastic time. There's very little information that we have that's pre-dynastic that we can look to as being 100% clear. So we don't know. I mean, most of the stuff is mythology that you get into when we go back that far. So we don't know exactly what was going on during that time and what was the customs and how were they living. But, you know, everything seems to go back there. And when we start getting into this stuff in this video, you're going to understand why. It's going to make a lot of sense. It's these Egyptians, the ones that we know about, the ones they've been digging up, are not the same Egyptians who built the pyramids. They are not the same Egyptians who built the Sphinx. So what was these Egyptians doing? They were trying to go back. They were trying to remember who they was and understand how to get that power again. So the whole mystery and secret of ancient Egypt, when you go and you start digging into it, when you start reading all the books and looking at what they taught, they were trying to recreate what the previous civilizations have done. So when we look at the bent pyramid of Sneferu or the step pyramid of Zoser, you know, when we start looking at these things, when we start looking at the pyramid of Unis and Teti and Pepi, we have to realize that these pyramids, you know, the pyramid of Necherket, who is Zoser and everything, the step pyramid that people think is so old and everything, these pyramids were done. They were built after the Great Pyramid. They were built after the Sphinx. So a lot of people come into Kemet and they think that this is the progression of pyramids. No. And I said this before. No, it's not the progression of pyramids that you see there. It is them trying to remember how to build the pyramids. The powers that be understand exactly what happened and what's going on, and they're using our ancestors' knowledge, the information that they wanted the world to really understand and to know. They're using that, you know, to basically control everything. And you got to understand that this information was supposed to be shared. Everybody was supposed to know what was going on and to act accordingly, to live by a universal law that they call Maat. Maat is such a beautiful thing to live by. We based all of our societies around the world off the principles of Maat, off of just truth, you know, righteousness, justice. You know, don't do something to a person that you don't want done to you or done to, you know, your family members or something like that. We live by that. I mean, just think about that. Everything that we do on this planet, if we did it according to Ma'at, according to just what you want for yourself as a person, then this world would be, you know, a great place. And that's what it's really about when you think about the whole, you know, parables that the ancient Egyptians was trying to teach about rising above your animal nature. And people really don't understand what we mean, you know, what they meant by animal nature. And it's sometimes there are things that cause you to do bad stuff. We call them demons. It's like when you know you have a drinking problem, but you go out and get a drink, you can't put down that bottom. It's an energy that comes over you, and people call it a spirit. That's why, you know, wine and spirits. It's an energy that comes over you that we call bad, or you can just call it the wrong decision, the wrong choice. That is a energy that at one moment you are good and you are doing things according to, you know, your reality, but you teeter on something bad and you understand that it's bad. And even though you still move towards it, knowing it's the wrong thing to do, people don't really get those little cartoons when you had a angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder. I mean, this is like real stuff. I mean, you look over, it's a, you know, you got an angel and it's trying to persuade you to do the right thing. But then you also look over and you got this devil over here and it's like, you know, it's your energy trying to convince you to do something that you shouldn't do. That is the animal nature, the lower self that you are subjected to, that the ancient Egyptians understood, and they tried hard as they could to get the people to understand. Rise above your animal nature and do what's right. The person that reveals himself or herself right as they're doing something evil is not truly them. I mean, as I said before, think about what it takes for you to pull out a gun and point it to someone's head and pull the trigger, knowing what's going to happen, knowing the carnage that's going to take place when you blow a person's brains out. It's unbelievable for a person to do that. But when you understand what was created, the evil that had to be created for a person to do that, this is everything the ancient Egyptians understood and didn't want the people to succumb to. And when you look at our reality today, I mean, their worst nightmares have been realized in our society and the black community itself. And it's ironic that, our enemies, the powers that be, has used the knowledge of that against us, we are basically those Egyptians. We don't know what we did, but that energy is us. We are the ancients. And this is what I want you to understand. And they understood this. So what we're going to really get into in this part 2 of the Preparing for the Mental Nature is understanding this stuff, understanding, the gods, understanding why they worship beings a certain way, the principles, the creation story, the whole waters of Noon. We're going to get into all that in this DVD, in this video, so you can understand this and really start understanding what they were going to be teaching, or what the mental nature is trying to get into, because it goes so much deeper onto such a level that it's going to be really hard to comprehend. So now, as I was saying, we know the ancient Egyptians were not the ones to build the Great Pyramids. They were trying to recreate them and remember, what they did. They tried to bring back the power source that was basically helping them survive and helping them live longer, helping them basically prosper as far as agriculture, and keeping the civilization going. So, one of the things that really help us understand that they were trying to remember this and that it wasn't these ancient Egyptians is Akhenaten. When we look at Akhenaten, and remember that Akhenaten is credited as being the first monotheist. And Akhenaten looked around and he's seen, once he became Pharaoh, or the Nisut, he's seen that, everybody was worshiping so many gods. And the gods, they looked at them in principles of nature, as far as nature, the sun and everything like that. So Akhenaten looks at nature and says to himself, basically, well, there is a oneness to nature. Everything comes out of one. You have a mother and a father, but really you are created inside of one, your mother, and you come out of one. Your mother births you, she creates you, within. And especially since the ancient Egyptians understood that, woman could create life without a male, then they really looked at, everything as one. So no matter what, you're coming out of the oneness of something. So, while everybody was worshiping so many gods, Akhenaten say, you know what? There is one God. It's one God. There isn't a whole bunch of, deities out there, and if there is, they had to come from somewhere. So there is one. So Akhenaten basically gave us the solar disk, or Aten. Now with Aten, the solar disk, we all looked around, ancient Egyptian artifacts. We've seen this stuff everywhere, and you always seen that solar disk. That is Aten. And Akhenaten, which is, he changed his name from Amenhotep IV, which would have been, to Akhenaten, to basically cultivate himself to assume the oneness of that God. So he basically outlawed all the other gods and told everybody, hey, he basically pissed Kemet off and said, he shut down the temples, stopped the worship of all the other gods. And we got Aten, and they worship Aten, as the one universal God. So now we're talking about the 18th dynasty, the 14th century BCE. So the thing I want you to understand, when we're talking about 1353 to like 1336, I think it was, that Akhenaten reigned. So what you have to understand is 18th dynasty is relatively close to the creation of the Bible and everything like that, the creation of the Torah, or what have you, Greek mythology and everything like that. So if in the 18th dynasty, if in the 14th century BCE, they were just then coming into the speculation or the understanding that there could possibly be one God, that alone tells us that there's no way the dynasties before them, any of the dynasties, could have built the Great Pyramids, because there is perfection within the pyramids. I mean, as close to perfection as you can get. The pyramids are not just, the pyramids. They didn't just serve a function. I mean, they put in it everything. I mean, I can go on for days of what they did, what they put into it. So basically, all of the knowledge that the ancient Egyptians wrote about, that they're talking about, and that we think is possible, the ancient Egyptians, the ones before the dynasties who actually built the pyramids, actually built proof that this knowledge exists when they built the Great Pyramid. And that is, attributed to the fact that it's perfect. It's almost perfect to true north. The fact that when you measure the circumference and you add it together, basically when you draw a circle around the base and you add the points, the sides together, it equals the speed of light. Stuff like this. I mean, they put into it so much math, geometry, and we're going to get into some of that a little bit in this video. And they put into it the proof, so that if you ever thought that this stuff was just talk, if you really understood what they put into the pyramids when they built it, then you know that these people they accomplished it. Not just for the simple fact that they cut those big stones and everything is set perfectly and everything like that. The sheer weight of it is impossible. It's mind-boggling when you think how they did this stuff. Not only is that crazy and does that prove that these people were powerful, but the deeper meaning is the math, the geometry, which it shuts everything down. Now, we know when Akhenaten died, when Tutankhamun took over King Tut, his son. When they took over the throne, they basically coerced him to basically reopen the temples, to bring back the worship of all the gods. And, this pleased Kemet. It pleased a lot of people to bring back this worship. So it was really important to people who understood why all the gods should be worshipped and why they must be understood and known, because a lot of people thought Akhenaten just lost his damn mind because some of the people seen let's just say the math, the science, and the worship of these other deities. And you'll understand this as we go along, why they should be worshipped and at least known and understood, because it wasn't just like you was worshiping these beings as being actual beings who existed. There's a deeper meaning behind them. So people who are, let's just say like the secret societies, or the people who was basically, behind the scenes of the Nisut, who was making sure that everything was ran right, they knew the true meaning of these deities. And you would think Akhenaten would know as well, but he wanted this one God, and he wasn't wrong in what he was saying. He just shouldn't outlaw the worship of all the other gods, because they are as important as well. So we know Tut assumed the throne and they reopened the temples or what have you. But I want you guys to really understand who these gods are that we talk about. So I'm going to go through almost all the gods of ancient Kemet. I'm pretty sure you guys don't know them all. I'm going to go through most of them, and the really important ones, I'm going to leave some out just for time's sake, because there's a lot of them. But I want you guys to really listen and understand who these guys are, the attributes of these gods, these Egyptian gods, because it's going to help us as we go along, not just in this series, but when we start to get into the Metu itself, so you can understand why, the things that they ascribe gods to and why, because it's deeper, especially when we get into the creation story. Oh man, it's going to get crazy with that. And you'll see what I'm talking about. So let's get right into it. Now, some of these guys that I name, I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on them, and others I'm just going to go by for time's sake. But we really want to get into most of them in an entire series because they are important. And you're going to start to see some of the things that I talked about in previous videos. You're going to understand why. It's going to make a lot of sense. So now, Amon is the king of the gods. He's the god of wind. Usually you see him with the ram's head or the head of a man. And we know Amon combined with Ra gives us Amon-Ra. Next, we have Anubis, who is the god of the dead, the god of embalming, funerals, mourning ceremonies. He has the jackal head. We all know this. A lot of people don't know that Anubis is also the son of Osiris and Nephthys. He is the brother of Horus. We have Aten, who is the sun disk I just talked about. He is an aspect of the god Ra. So depending on, it's another thing you got to understand, depending on what part of Egypt or Kemet that you are in, there are different stories about these mythological gods, different stories. We're going to get into that a little bit here. You got to understand, if you go to Memphis, you have the Memphite text or the whole Shabaka stone we're going to get into. You got to understand, it's different stories depending on where you at in Kemet or depending on who you talk to or what have you. We're going to get into that a little bit. Oh, yeah. Another thing about Set. I wrote this down. Set is supposed to have killed Osiris out of jealousy. He is half man and half something else. He's a hybrid. Nobody knows what Seth is mixed with. And a lot of people who looked at the depictions, they don't have a clue what it's mixed with. So that's one of those things that's out there. I wanted you guys to understand that. Some people will tell you straight up, Seth is mixed with like a dragon or mixed with something like that. Because of the depiction of Set being basically Satan, a lot of people will just say, well, he's probably mixed with a dragon or what have you, because they usually depict them as like a man with wings or what have you when you see drawings. But when you look at the ancient Egyptian depictions of Seth, they can't tell you exactly what he's mixed with, except for the fact that he's mixed. Knowing what was the parable behind these guys, why was they created, why are these aspects important, and where do they fit? That is the key to all this. Energy had to have always been there, just like, existence has always been here. So the ancient Egyptians looked at it, well, energy must have always been here along with existence. The thing was, consciousness wasn't aware of itself and it wasn't aware of the energy. And when it became aware of itself and became aware of energy, it made the first move. It made its first move, and then the next move after that took energy, and so on and so forth. And everything that came into existence after that requires energy. So no way around that. It's inescapable. Everything requires energy. So energy must have always been, just like existence. So we can say that the universe is infinite and that energy is infinite as well. And nothing can come into existence without energy. It can't happen. So when we look at the quantum physics, we look at the ultra small in quantum physics. And if we go to, string theory, strings to quarks, to protons and neutrons, to eventually atoms, this is a steady flow of energy that we get to reach the atom. And, when you look at the ancient Egyptian creation story, they called it the water waves of noon, and everything came into existence from that. So we're talking about the steady flow, the wave of atoms, steady flow of energy leading to the creation of the atom or atum. And, the ancient Egyptian creation story. So we know in the story you had Shu and Tefnut and Geb and Nut. And remember in the story you had that Shu and Tefnut got lost, and Atum sent the eye out and brought them back. They came back with the eye of Atum, or the eye of Ra, and he brought them back, and he was so happy that he wept, and it was the tears, the water, that brought about life on earth. And this is basically the same thing when we look at the creation story of us, how life came out of the waters, the primordial soup or whatever you want to call it. And it's the same thing. You can bounce it off back and forth, and it's trying to tell you something in this story, and there's a lot more to it when you look deeply into it. When we go to the Mystery Schools DVD, what did we talk about in there? We basically validated everything, and we seen the conclusion that they came up with, basically saying that it's math that is the language. It governs the universe, mathematics. So when we look, we remember from the ancient Egyptian creation story, what did they put in place to govern everything? Maat. And basically, math comes from Maat. And it's a lot of people that will tell you the same thing. It's the universal law. It's math, Maat, that governs everything. There's no way around it. It don't matter. We always say with the law, if it don't add up, you're guilty. It has to add up. We always use mathematical terms when we're talking about truth and justice and righteousness. It has to add up. It has to make sense. Now, remember in part 5, we talked about DNA and us having this animal DNA. So now we know that the ancient Egyptians obviously understood this. This is why we see so much animal stuff everywhere. The whole animal heads and everything people always talk about, and thinking that we worship animals and all that. We see the depiction. So when you look at the depiction of Khnum fashioning man on a potter's wheel, it's representing the fact that, they understood, of course, that we come from women, that women give birth to human beings. So seeing Khnum fashion man on a potter's wheel is saying that, our bodies is a creation. Our bodies was created. Our souls is put into the creation by Khnum. So Khnum puts the Ka into our bodies, our soul. So the reason why they have Khnum there with the ram's head is because in the ancient Egyptian language, soul and ram actually sounds the same. And we always see that depiction with Khnum fashioning a man, and you always look over and you see Akhenaten there too. And Akhenaten is basically creating the body of man inside the womb of the woman, the egg or what have you. And we know she is depicted as a frog. And as we also talked about in part 5, is how our insides, our muscular and skeletal systems resemble frogs. So this is why they use Akhenaten and used her as a frog and gave her that attribute and described that to her, because it's talking about our insides, and we see it resembles frogs. Now, we also talked about how we share genes with cows. And remember Heru, when he was born in the manger, Heru was there, or Hathor was there, symbolizing the surrogate mother. And this is all metaphorically speaking and trying to tell you that we have this DNA. And, you would think, how can a cow be a surrogate mother to, something that's supposed to be like a human being? And, this is why it's just symbolic that we share these same genes. And this is what it's talking about. We know that they stole that with Christianity, with Jesus in the manger and everything like that. We see the cow always there. Now, it's one thing to see the cow there once. If you see it there once, it's like, okay. But most of the depictions that we see, we always usually see this cow. So we know this is where they're stealing it from. They're taking it from, the creation story of Heru. And you can look at a lot of different pictures of the whole, Jesus in the manger, and you'll see that cow there. And it's just clearly plagiarism. And we see, that they taking it from the ancient Egyptian creation story of Heru. But, when you look at many of the depictions of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, you always see animals in some kind of zoomorphic form and some kind of animalistic nature, something taking place that's dealing with animals, because they understood the connection that we have and that we share these genes and DNA. So, when you go back to Ethiopia, we know about things, we know about Nut, and we know about the whole ancient Egyptian creation story. We know what hieroglyphics look like. You would expect to only find these things in, maybe Nubia, but in Egypt as well. You don't expect to find them as far south as Ethiopia. And of course, we do. When you go to Tia in Ethiopia, they find Nut. You find in Nubia the 6,000, 7,000 year old carvings and writings, hieroglyphic looking depictions from these cultures. So it's obvious, as we always say when people talking about Kemet, that Kemet came up through the Nile Valley civilizations, and ultimately landed in Kemet. The thing is,